Hello guys, welcome back to Shane and Shelf. I am in San Diego today, and honestly I hate the traffic so much. It's so crowded here. I love the weather in California. The weather is top notch, the beach is lovely, the mountains are great, but it's just so crowded. People have no idea how to drive. Not that I'm the best driver, of course, but like there's just so many terrible drivers. I can't tell you like how many accidents you see on the side of the road and just how many near accidents you see while driving. It's just kind of nerve-wracking. But either way, that's besides the point. Today I'm going to another bookstore. I'm going to try to show you the inside of the bookstore a little bit. I'm going to probably put audio over it after the fact because I'm going to be in there with my wife and kids. They're in there now. They just left to go in there, and I'll be meeting them in there in a second. So this is just the second state, and gonna try to find something short and sweet, or something maybe already on my TBR if possible. But we'll see. Just time to check something else off my list, and then hopefully it's not too long before I get to another state. But I'll see you guys in just a second. I'll show you the inside of the bookstore. We'll see how it goes. So this is the inside of Footnote Books. It was divided into two sections. The section on the left that I am standing in when I take this video is the nonfiction section, and then it probably was about 1/4 of the bookstore. The rest of it was fiction. It was super crowded, kind of overwhelming. Honestly, I wasn't able to get a lot of good footage. I didn't have space to stand back and show you guys, and there were just stacks of books everywhere. I think it would have been fun to just, if I lived in the area, go to this bookstore to explore it. But as far as filming inside of it, not a very convenient thing. Hello everybody, welcome back to Shane and Shelf. I am Shanen, and today I am back from my bookstore trip. It's actually literally only been 2 days since I went to the bookstore. I apologize for the footage. It's really not very good. I'll try maybe for the next bookstore to not get a store that is so claustrophobic and so crowded. Like, I realized when I was in there, I got a little bit of footage, of course, right? But I didn't get that much because it was just I feel like I wasn't showing you much with the video. Now I think I could, of course, done it better anyway. But it was kind of overwhelming, to be honest, to be in that bookstore. I kind of appreciate it, but filming it, I was kind of like, yeah, what's going on here? And like digging through things, well, there was a lot of good things that I didn't really have to dig for. But I'm like, I'm sure there are some gems in here that I just won't be able to find unless I want to knock over some of these stacks of books, because there were a lot that were just stacked up. It was kind of weird. I actually picked up 2 books at the bookstore, and one of them I'm not reading till next year in March, and that is The Gilded Age. It's the only book that Mark Twain co-wrote with someone else. That is Charles Dudley Warner. And so that's not the book I'm talking about today. The other book I picked up, and I just finished it, like just finished it before recording this, pretty much, like maybe 20 minutes ago. And that is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. So I just came out with a video for 10 authors that I need to read, that I haven't read, and I'm a little ashamed, I guess you could say, that I haven't read them. And number 10 on that list was Chinua Achebe. I think this book gets assigned in some high schools in the United States. I'm not sure. I never heard about it until very recently, actually. And it actually is book 1 of 3. Now, you don't need to read the other 2. This one ends at a fair point, I think, where you wouldn't feel like you need to read book 2 and 3. I'm going to try to read those at some point, but for now I'll give you my thoughts on Things Fall Apart. Generally speaking, it was a great book. Very fast, just over 200 pages, very easy, very quick read, highly recommend it. I think some high schooler had read this or something, because there was like some highlighted words throughout that were all like words where I'm like, yeah, if I was in high school, I don't know if I would know that word, but I knew them all now. And I just got it for a few bucks, and I actually specifically asked for it. And the guy knew, the bookstore owner knew exactly where it was. It was on top of a mountain, pretty much. But either way, the story is mostly about this one guy, Okonkwo. And to preface, I don't really know that much about Nigerian culture. I lived in Ghana for a couple of years. In fact, my experience there is pretty relatable to the experience in Things Fall Apart, because I was a missionary there. And things change pretty drastically in this story. Well, really part 2 of this story. In part 1, there's 3 parts. Part 1 is the bulk, is when the white man comes and he brings Christianity, mostly. I lived with a few Nigerians when I lived in Ghana. Hello, for any of you guys watching out there. They were from, we had some Yoruba and Ibibio Igbo. And Igbo is the people in this book. They're a little bit more inland. They're not a coastal people, so it explained why the white man doesn't really show up till about the 1890s. That's when this story takes place. While the Ibobio and Yoruba are both coastal people, Ibobio are both like southern. They're like a relatively small tribe. The big tribes in Nigeria, if you're not aware, I should say, are Yoruba, which is where Lagos is, the biggest city in Nigeria, and then Igbo is spoken, I think, by about 15% of the population as well, similar to Yoruba, and then Hausa, which is in the northern end. And now I'm not very acquainted with the Hausa. They're the Muslim part of the country. And I've never been to Nigeria, generally speaking, anyway. Lots of the things he talked about, like fufu, bitter leaf soup, agushi, and so lots of the food I did know about. I've had most of it while I was in Ghana. Delicious, by the way, especially agushi. I've heard people call it agushi and agusi. I'm not sure if that's just a regional difference or not, actually. And then I knew a guy. Chukwu means God in Igbo, and I knew a guy, his middle name was Ifakachukwu. And I don't know what that means, actually. Something to do with God. Other guy I knew was Olawashun, which I think Ola means God, but that's in Yoruba. Let me know what those names mean if you know what they are. I could always ask, could reach out and ask. I'm definitely still in contact with the Yoruba Igbo guy I've not talked to in a few years. But this is Igbo, and I'm assuming Chinua Achebe is Igbo himself. I'm not exactly sure. He did spend a lot of his latter part of his life in the United States, but he is a Nigerian, of course, and it's a sad story. I think I've seen someone somewhere describe it as kind of like a Greek tragedy, but it's in Nigeria. And I think that's fair, actually, in many ways. Different setting. They are people that kind of falter or get their way of life changed drastically, and not always for the better, due to Englishmen coming, due to the white Christian coming. And now they come relatively peacefully, not slaughtering them, although that does happen, not to the village, the main village itself, but to a neighboring village that gets wiped out pretty much. And that's a sad reality. But it's pretty much like we don't want to abandon the old gods and the old ways for something that, is new and that doesn't understand us. Obviously is not our God. Now there are some things that happen that would allude to the new God being pretty good, and that's why they get some converts. And one thing that was good about Christianity in many ways is the egalitarian nature of it. So lots of the early converts were people who were not necessarily high titled people in society, which I think is also good. And also, not mercilessly beating your wives. And I think those are things that are essentially objectively good, and I think most people would agree on that. But at the same time, they were drastically having their way of life changed, not pretty much taken away from them. Their understanding of the world was being changed, and they had benefited from the white foreigner without having seen him. It's obvious throughout the story that they have some weapons and stuff like that that are European in make, but they've never seen white people themselves. But they've gotten them through trade somehow, and that makes sense, right? But then when the white guy actually shows up and they're doing churches, things start to change pretty drastically. Some people take advantage of it. It's pretty much like a shift in the power structures, because there are some good things that come from Christianity, and I've talked about this very briefly with Mark from Book Ramble in just the comment section. I can't remember if it was on my channel or his, but that in many ways the people are already more in line with Christianity than the Anglican pastors that came to bring it. Obviously, in many ways they weren't, but at least the understanding of the world often was, killing your kids just because they were twins or just because of some other superstitious thing, I think is not good. But there were some things that were fine about the culture that were completely uprooted because the priest said so. And now it's a weird perspective, because Chinua Achebe could have given us a character that was more easy to grieve with, and he didn't. He gave us a bad guy. And so it's weird because at the beginning, like throughout the story, it was kind of an interesting look at a culture that most of us aren't acquainted with, and I'm loosely acquainted with it. So I probably more than the average reader though, and I'm still not greatly acquainted with it, and it was interesting. But there are some things you definitely know that are like this is a very interesting and admirable in many ways, but sometimes it's not. Like when he had to kill essentially his foster son, that's not admirable in any way. I didn't think, and they were pretty much told by their priestess that that's what they had to do. Didn't give a reason why. They were just told to do it, and they did it. Now, if anything, maybe it's admirable their willingness to do what they think their god is telling them to do, but that is not. It's not usually good to kill people, right? Okonkwo, he did it himself. Now that wasn't his intention, and it hurt him. But he's not a good person. He lets his anger rule him. He cares way too much about himself, not about his family. He cares about title and his prestige and his own self-serving attributes. Essentially, that's he is not someone that you are meant to like in many ways. But then you also don't like the people that come and finally confront him. Because even when he gets exiled at some point, so this is spoilers, of course, sorry, uh, you feel kind of bad. It was an accident, and so that helps feeling bad. But at the same time, it's like he's probably the most deserving person, right, to be exiled. Maybe it'll humble him a bit. And then when he gets back and he's trying to make a name for himself as much as possible again, it doesn't really work out because of these Christians kind of taking things out of hand. And he is over the top reacting to them. If it went his way, he would have slaughtered them all, and that's not an appropriate response. But at the same time, the Christians were literally slaughtered all the people in one village, despite being Christian, claiming that at least, and we're uprooting the way of life too. And so Chinua Achebe kind of says that we do not understand each other, and they didn't. But we also don't. They don't care. We don't care to. We don't care to seek understanding. Now, the tribal people seem to be more, and the people of the village seem to be more willing to do that, and that might have been out of necessity. But you could tell there was some level of respect to these strangers, and the priest didn't really care. He didn't really have the same respect, and I know why. He's because he's like, oh, I worship the one true God and stuff like that. But at the same time, he seems to think that telling them that they're heathens is a way to show love to them. And this is actually a pretty common thing, I think, in most Christian branches. It's like, well, they're heathens or they're heretics, so therefore I need to condemn them, because if I don't tell them that they're condemned, then they're never going to change. Now, not to offend any other Christians, I don't think that's a very loving thing. Uh, my understanding of Christ is a bit more loving than that, but either way, a lot of other Christians don't like me anyhow. But Okonkwo's not a good guy. The white Christians that come in are not good guys, and it's like, who the hell's a good guy? Like, who's a good person here? Like, maybe this is why this is a modern classic, because I feel bad for the villagers mostly, and maybe Okonkwo's family, not him, although I do a little bit, but I understand the priest in many ways, although I still think he's a fool and not a good person in many ways too, right? It's a weird it's a weird story, because I think I don't know. I haven't really talked to people about this story who have also read it. I've only talked to a couple people briefly who recommended it to me, but we didn't go into details. Maybe I need to get in and talk to them about it. If you have read it, please give me your thoughts. Again, I only just finished reading it, so my thoughts may change a bit, and I may need to reread it, or maybe they'll expand when I read books 2 and 3. But that's what, in many ways, I said felt like a Greek tragedy, is because I do and I don't feel for the main character, because he's not a very good guy. And then for his enemy, I don't really like his enemy. I understand his enemy to a degree, but I still don't necessarily think he's a good guy. It's just like life. It's a lot of bad people, evil people punish other evil people inadvertently, often, or not on purpose. Whatever. They're usually all self-serving. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Um, to say the least. Very thought-provoking, if that's not obvious. I'm still having a hard time understanding what my thoughts are exactly. But in the sake of not making this too long, I'm going to stop talking for now. Please let me know your own thoughts. I would appreciate it. And I'm going to hopefully not be too long before getting to another state. So California makes 2 of 50. And I don't know when I'm going to get to state number 3. I should be in Idaho in December. So about 2 months from me recording this, I should be in Idaho. I will be in Utah, I know, in February. There's a good chance I'll go through Nevada if I drive up to Utah. I don't know exactly how that's going to happen. I am within a relatively like a day trip or 2-day trip of New Mexico and Texas if we count El Paso. And so I may be able to knock off a few states, but it's probably going to be a relatively slow roll. I will be getting to Montana at some point too when I get all my stuff out of storage, and I'll just try to pass by one of the bookstores there. So I'll get to a few, but I'm in the western United States. The states are pretty big. It's not super convenient to get to all of them, and I don't have money to just fly to every state. I'm also not retired or anything. I don't necessarily have the time. I have a young family, but either way, I can recommend the bookshop again. Footnote Books. It was a place I would definitely go to again if I was in San Diego. And if I lived in San Diego, I'd probably be hitting it up relatively frequently. But even if a little bit overwhelming going in and being like, wow, I was supposed to film in here, and it's like, this is kind of too much. Like, I couldn't back away to get a good shot, like, enough, like, really anywhere in the bookstore. But either way, I will see you guys next time. Please feel free to like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it, and have a good one. Thank you.